Hey everybody, it's Richard. Frank and I are going to be breaking down UFC 215, previewing, if you will, the main card of the big pay-per-view this weekend, featuring a pair of UFC title fights. That is after I remind you that this podcast, Phone Booth Fighting, is brought to you by Low T Nation. The guys over at Low T Nation, a couple of good podcast subscribers just like yourselves, and they are providing an invaluable service to, from what I understand, talking to them, more and more of our listeners every week. LowTNation.com is the website to find out more about the plague, the damnable plague of low testosterone, and whether or not you are a candidate for treatment. What you're going to do is go to lowtnation.com. You can either contact them electronically or you can call the number there at the website. Either way, you're going to get in touch with Brandon or one of his capable assistants over there, and they're going to put you in touch with a lab, no matter where you live throughout the United States, that can run some quick tests on you. And honestly, that's the only real effort, the only trip outside your house you're going to have to make, because once you do that, the lab results get submitted to Low T Nation. They take it from there. If you're a candidate for treatment, they will drop ship the supplies to you right to your front door. And if you find yourself lacking in energy, just not quite as much get up and go as you used to have when you're younger, maybe you're getting into your 40s now, maybe even beyond, and that describes a lot of guys out there, certainly a lot of our listeners. And if that's the case, it's certainly worth checking your levels just to see if there's any issue with low testosterone. You hear Frank talk about it all the time, and I know he would want me to echo those sentiments and tell you guys to head to lowtnation.com and give him a call. Get in touch with him and see if you are a candidate. Brandon will be happy to field your phone call. Like I said, I talked to him and hear that more and more of you guys are contacting him on a weekly basis. So hit him up. Let him know that myself and Frank sent you guys over there. And if you're like a growing number of our listeners, then you too will be on board with Low T Nation and you'll feel better for it. LowTNation.com. This podcast also brought to you by Earth's Brew, plant-based nirvana, relaxation fusing the best of all worlds, health, taste, efficacy, and experience. And I'll tell you what, I am on my way home from the brothel, as I do, and later on this evening, I can tell you one thing I'm going to be doing for sure, and that's enjoying some Earth's Brew, a little powder packet mixed up in a glass of water, non-alcoholic, 100% plant-based, and absolutely 100% relaxing. So it's good for a non-drinking vegan like me, or it's good for a hard-drinking heathen like you. Either way, Earth's Brew is an important way to enhance your day. Frank and I tell you guys about its effects, how we enjoy using it after jiu-jitsu training. That's definitely the right time for a packet of Earth's Brew. You can go to earthsbrew.com to find out more information, find out what's in it. Also, just as importantly, what's not in it, like a bunch of chemicals and preservatives and addictive substances and things like that. No, not Earth's Brew, 100% plant-based and health-based. earthsbrew.com, and how about this, a special discount just for Phone Booth Fighting listeners and only for you guys. If you enter the promo code PhoneBooth at checkout, that's the promo code PhoneBooth, you get 10% off all orders. Whatever you're ordering, it's 10% off if you enter the promo code PhoneBooth. earthsbrew.com. Tell them Frank Meir and Richard Hunter sent you. Welcome to Phone Booth Fighting, everybody. Twice weekly, absolutely free in iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, Stitcher Radio, or wherever podcasts are available. The official show website is phoneboothfighting.com. It is there that you find our official show merchandise. You find all of our previously aired and archived episodes. You find our Amazon banner that we really appreciate you clicking through to do your shopping on Amazon, and doesn't cost you any more, but we get a little percentage kickback on each purchase to help build out the show, myself and the two-time UFC heavyweight champion Frank Mir. And when I say, Frank, build out the show, normally I'm talking about all the bells and whistles we're adding into the studio inside the bunker deep within the bowels of stately Mir Manor. But today I'm more specifically referencing our mobile gear, because you're in some admiral's club in an airport and I'm outside a Southern Nevada brothel, and somehow with the magic of just a microphone and a cell phone, we're able to produce this podcast on the fly. So let's hear it for technology.
Yeah, it's a good thing. Otherwise, we would only be talking to each other about once a month, right, buddy?
That's right, because Frank is on another world tour, headed to a country that ends in Stan. Am I right?
Yes, this time I'm going to Almaty, Kazakhstan for the ACB.
Hey, I got to ask you real quick. We're going to break down UFC 216 this coming weekend is when that fight card goes down, and a couple of twin title fights on the card. Demetrious Johnson defending his belt, Amanda Nunes defending hers as well. But I have to ask you, not really speaking of ACB, but Global Fight Night, or Fight Night Global over there, another one of those Russian promotions. Did you see Diego Brandao jump out of the cage in the middle of his fight over there a week ago?
No, I didn't catch that, man.
He was fighting I think it was a Russian guy. I didn't know much about the guy who was fighting, and I just saw a clip of it. You can find it online, but basically what it looked like happened was this: Diego is in this guy's guard, and Diego's on bottom, so I should say the Russian is in Diego's guard, and the Russian appears to headbutt Diego in the chest a couple of times. The referee admonishes him for it and basically attempts to stop the action, so he can address it. I don't know if he's going to take a point or whatever. Diego up kicks him illegally while the guy's on his knees, ends up hitting him in the throat, and there's some attempt at communication there, but Diego's so pissed, he just climbs over the cage and leaves. About midway through the second round, ends up getting disqualified. Unless your historian brain can think of an example I couldn't have, I think that's the only time I've ever seen that, Frank.
It's the only time I've ever heard of that. Yeah. What was that, in Fight Nights, or where was it at?
Yeah, it was somewhere over in Russia, I think. It was Fight Night Global, so I know that for sure. And
I'm going to check that video out now after you said that. No, I didn't catch that.
Yeah.
Obviously, the biggest news is, since we've been back, Connor, that now that I'm home, there's just, I was trying to catch up with the kids. So I've actually kind of had a little bit of a blinders put onto the world of MMA, paying attention more to North Korea, honestly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, Diego Brandao had his mind elsewhere. I don't know what was going on with that, but that's a guy who's had a few issues in his past. So maybe, who knows, maybe we can track him down for phone booth fight and get to the bottom of what happened. Before we do that, though, we've got to talk about UFC 215 this weekend, because, Frank, your friend and mine, Demetrious Mighty Mouse Johnson, is on the cusp of UFC history. He has already tied Anderson Silva's UFC consecutive title defense record with 11, and with a win over Ray Borg this Saturday night, he will break that record. And as you and I have talked about on the show, with Anderson not retired, but probably doesn't have another title run, or let alone another 12 title defenses left in him, and nobody even anywhere close to being on the heels of Mighty Mouse with that record. I think that's a record that could stand for an awfully long time if he can do it Saturday.
I mean, there's really nobody else in their weight class. I mean, John Jones has really put himself above and beyond anybody at 205, but the problem with John that has happened now is everything that occurs outside of the cage. So with those things now being said, Demetrious Johnson is just every bit as much of a fighter in the cage as he has been, as far as dominating his fellow man at his weight class. But on top of that, you never have any issues. He's passed every single drug test. He's never in issues. I mean, the worst habit the guy has, maybe if you want to call it a bad habit, is he'll occasionally share a beer at a barbecue with his family. You know what I mean? But the guy is as wholesome as they come, as much as work ethic as anybody I've ever heard of in my life. He's just a, I mean, shit, the guy just plays video games. I even figured out a way to get paid to do that.
Yes, I started to say that's a man.
A great martial artist.
That's a man after your own heart. A guy who's figured out to how to monetize his video game addiction. Now, with this opponent, Ray Borg, and I'm glad that this has worked out for Demetrious this way, because it seems like it was just a month or two ago that you and I were talking about the back and forth that DJ was having with Dana White over Dana wanted him to fight TJ Dillashaw, and Demetrious wanted a proper shot at breaking that flyweight title defense record against an actual ranked flyweight. And Ray Borg is certainly that. Now, Borg is a guy who has had weight issues in the past. Twice now, he has missed weight at the 125-pound limit, and that's in non-title fights where he had the 1-pound allowance. This one, he's going to have to hit a 125 on the dot. Maybe asking a heavyweight isn't the best guy to talk to about, you know, the science of weight cutting, but I know you've been around it long enough to have some inside perspective. What goes into that in terms of, let's say a guy has a bad weight cut or doesn't make weight at all, and so they have to make the decision about do they still take the fight, that sort of thing. What advantages can that mean, and what disadvantages can it mean if a guy ends up missing weight but still fighting?
Well, honestly, I think the best person to ask this question would be John McCarthy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's always my resident expert on everything MMA regulation-wise. And I would just want to make sure that if I was in Demetrious Johnson's corner, that if my opponent does miss weight, let's just say Ray Borg, who's missed weight twice before at 125, like you said, with the 1-pound allowance, after we're done negotiating and everything and we make this fight happen, does it still count as a title defense? You know, because that would be horrible if it's that, because of the technicality, that this doesn't count towards the momentum and towards the record for Demetrious if they don't make it an official title fight.
Yeah, I think the way that I've seen that go down in the past is a lot of times the challenger will forfeit his shot at the title if he were going to win. In other words, if he were going to win the fight, he would maybe not become the champion, but the champion is still recognized for defending the title. I'll tell you an example of this is way back when Travis Lutter missed weight against Anderson Silva. That was still a middleweight title defense for Silva.
Oh, was it? Okay, I thought they only made it 3 rounds. I thought a better example would have been the, wasn't it just Ferguson? No, not Ferguson. Was it Max Holloway when he fought Anthony Pettis? Anthony Pettis was not viable or did not have the ability to win the title.
That's right.
He won the fight, so they still made it a 5-round fight. But I thought with Anderson Silva, they only made that a 3-round fight.
No, because Silva was the champion.
Right, he was.
I mean, unless back then they could have, unless they elected to have a 3-round title fight, but that was, but see, that was considered one of, in fact, that's one of the consecutive title defenses that.
Then you're right.
Mighty Mouse has a shot against. Yeah, so I mean that's been a while back. We have looking at.
So then at least on that part, and then after that it comes down to just negotiations. You know, obviously they're going to want to make the fight happen, and honestly, I see that a lot here over the ACB.
Yeah.
Where guys will miss weight, so then, you know, camps come in and start negotiating, like, all right, I want 20% of your purse, or I want 50% of your purse, depending on how bad they miss. And then on top of that, they'll even negotiate point deductions. So sometimes you'll watch some of the fights here I commentate at ATV, and you'll see the referee come out and right off the bat pull out a yellow card and display it to one of the fighters, saying that, well, that fighter missed weight, and part of the negotiations was he's already down a point.
Yeah.
So even if he wins that first round, best he can do is a draw for the first round, make it a 9-9. And so, you know, so all those things come into consideration, but you don't want to overdo the negotiation aspect of it, because then you can talk yourself out of a fight, which, so there's really like a lot of cat and mouse that goes on. where you want to gain something out of a situation and put your fighter at an advantage, because the other guy, obviously, if he missed weight, he's a little bit bigger. He didn't cut his weight properly the hard way. So you don't want to let him off the hook because now he has an advantage. So you want to somehow put the ball in your court, but you can't just completely just murder the other guy. I've seen some cramps over here just ask for some ludicrous, situations where, well, you can only put 3 kilos on, the equivalent of like 7 pounds, by tomorrow's weigh-in. You can't weigh more than 7 pounds over the weight. It's like, well, what?
Mm-hmm.
Now we're talking about fighters' health and safety, and then the commission comes in and goes, well, regardless whether you guys agree to this shit, we don't agree to it. We're not allowing somebody to go in there under par standards and get hurt. And so, if Varg does miss it, it's an opportunity for, the camps to try to come out there. As long as it's within only a pound of the missing, it's pretty standard, 10% to 20% of what they're going to take purse-wise. And then the commissions already have it kind of set up. It's that when it becomes a gross negligence of a miss, a guy shows up 5 pounds heavy.
Yeah, didn't even try.
Now we're going to get the camps involved and see what we can work out.
Well, Borg says he won't have any weight cutting issues this time around, so we'll find out Friday morning. But he is going to have to hit 125 pounds on the dot since it is a title fight. Now, Mighty Mouse Frank is a massive favorite in this fight. I saw him at minus 1,000.
Unless they put Godzilla across the cage from him, I'm pretty sure he's a massive favorite.
Yeah. Borg is, Borg's a durable fighter. He's never been stopped.
Yeah.
He's got that going for him. But that being said, even if it looks a little bit like a potential 5-round decision on paper for Mighty Mouse, do you see it going any different way than it usually does for DJ?
No, I mean, and DJ too. He just. And again, it's sad. Like I keep wanting to say this, DJ and John. We're really in an era where we're probably seeing 2 of the best fighters that ever lived.
Yeah.
But the advantage of John or the DJ is that we don't have any of the drama and any of the other shit that comes involved with John that just has really hurt his career.
Mm-hmm.
And with Demetrious, man, you just as a martial artist right now, if you told me, Frank, we're going to bring you into a camp and you got a coach on how to beat this guy's ass, I'm like, dude, save your money. I don't know how to beat him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how we can sit on paper and we can make a clear-cut plan. Besides, it's somebody who's just, well, if you give me one of the best guys in the world, like it's only a lock, to Dominic Cruz. Well, okay, Dominic Cruz, that was 7 or 8 years ago when he was also at the top of his career, one of the best fighters in the world pound for pound, and he's a weight class above him. I'm like, all right, well, if you give me that set of scenario, maybe we could beat him, but somebody his size, no, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, and I'm glad just from a historic perspective this has worked out the way it has. Now maybe Borg upsets DJ and we see a different kind of history made Saturday night, but I'm just glad that we got the chance to see it play out the way that it's playing out, that there wasn't some sort of more convoluted situation of a heavier fighter coming down to meet DJ, or DJ having to go up, or a catch weight, or some sort of super fight scenario that I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to seeing Mighty Mouse in. But I like to get this little bit of history settled first, especially given the fact, Frank, that it is I think a record that is so cumulative in its chronology and so difficult to break. As records go, it seems like a pretty important one, and one that is only going to come around maybe with the MMA frequency of a solar eclipse.
Absolutely. I mean, in our lifetime we might never see this again. I mean, it's the same thing as like when the Miami Dolphins went undefeated in 1972. When does that happen? I mean, you've seen it get close. The Patriots a couple seasons back almost did it. But, I mean, there's just certain things that are just incredible. And because there's so many ways to lose in MMA, so many top fighters. I mean, look, Conor McGregor was the biggest draw in MMA. He's not undefeated. He's been submitted before 3 different times. It happens. It doesn't mean he's not a great fighter. Even the greatest of fighters lose in our sport because there's just so many ways to lose. And we're pitted against, the best of the best, always facing each other all the time. Not like boxing where, you got a guy who's a champ, but who's he ever faced? We separate him away from all the other fighters until it's that one money fight at the end of his career. And so, you know, to be a part of something where a guy can go this long undefeated against the level of talent that he has, it's incredible. And talking to what you're saying, I'm glad this isn't TJ Dillashaw's fight, because I really think that, you know, Demetrious Johnson has put the work in to deserve that this to really be about him if he wins. Whereas I feel like if they would have had the DJ fight, which I think is super interesting, I think that's a good fight for Demetrious in the future as far as wanting to raise his monetary value, to become more like a Conor McGregor where you can sell out. He needs to have other superstar fights. So I think he needs, TJ in the future, but I think it would have overshadowed the moment of what this is. Seeing, you know, somebody go this long undefeated, break a record, be a part of it. Like, this historical event needs to be standalone by itself. And then the next fight can be a, you know, former champ, you know, bantamweight coming down to face, you know, arguably the best fighter that ever lived.
Now, the more competitive of the two title fights that are going to be featured Saturday night on pay-per-view, Frank, is in the women's bantamweight division. The champion, Amanda Nunes, defending in a rematch against Valentina Shevchenko. Now, this is a fight that was originally supposed to happen at UFC 213 back in July, and Nunes pulled out the day of the fight, and that was a pretty significant blow to that card. These two on paper, odds makers have it very close. In fact, Shevchenko is a very slight favorite in this fight. The first fight resulted in a unanimous decision for Nunes. But, you know, here's what we know about Nunes, Frank, is that she can be very aggressive, especially early on. Shevchenko starts a little slow, but Nunes has had problems in the past with emptying her gas tank too quickly, and both of these fighters finish fights. They are Nunes has finished what is the number? She's 6 of 7 of her UFC victories have been in the first round, and 13 of her 14 wins have come via stoppage. Shevchenko has had 10 of her 14 career wins come via stoppage as well. So, you know, the fact that these two actually fought to a decision was a little bit unusual for both of them. So in a lot of areas, on paper anyway, and in the footage that we've seen the first time around, a pretty well-matched fight. But what are your thoughts, especially maybe in regards to Nunes's propensity to step on the gas early and maybe see some cardio issues later on in the fight?
Well, I mean, I think she fights according to the type of athlete she is. She's an explosive, high-octane, quick twitch fiber athlete. She has knockout power. She's explosive. She can submit you quick. But, I mean, she's not a long-distance runner. I mean, and I think that's the thing in our sport. People, again, I think I've harped on this many a times on our show, is when someone's not as strong as somebody else or doesn't hit as hard as somebody else, we acknowledge that that's genetically predisposed at birth. It's like, well, how hard you can hit. You can improve it, but if you're not a knockout Anthony Johnson, you're probably not going to be able to create yourself into that type of situation. But cardio and especially aerobic abilities are the same way. Muscular endurance. Some people have an affinity to be better at muscular endurance than others. And Amanda Nunes is a sprinter. If she was a track athlete, she's a 100-meter sprinter. She's not going to be running 800 anytime soon, where Shevchenko is a very good 800-meter runner. So she can withstand those early rounds, and she still has the ability to, she has a good kick to her. She has the ability to push the issue she has to, but her muscles allow her to continue on. And I think that's why the odds maker are giving her the slight favor, because in their first outing, Amanda Nunes really put it on her early on, but was fading in that third round. And you've seen Shevchenko being more of a middle distance type of fighter, able to pick up her cadence. And they're thinking, well, if this is a 5-round fight, Amanda Nunes can't. It's not about heart. It's not about dedication and training. She's only has so much in the gas tank because she's a power athlete. And that being said, is that if she doesn't get out early, there's always a chance that you can withstand it and go on.
What about the size difference? Nunes is a bigger 135. And there's actually been some talk from her in the past at some point about, maybe fighting in the women's featherweight division. Shevchenko's been the opposite. Shevchenko could probably actually fight at 125, and now that there is a women's flyweight division, that would certainly be a viable option for her, especially if she were to lose this fight Saturday night and then have 2 losses on her record against the reigning champion, that proverbial title contender's glass ceiling that we talk about. Do you think that, one fighter maybe being naturally 10 pounds lighter and the other fighter being on the heavier end of that women's bantamweight division could make a difference for Nunes?
Well, I think it also, too, kind of accentuates each other's strengths. Amanda Nunes being a big, powerful athlete, I think having the size advantage would help her out. But at the same time, Shevchenko being the lighter, I mean, she's gone against girls with great reach like Holly Holm, victory over her, who's a very big bantamweight. So that being said, she's already shown that she can deal with size. And I think the fact that she's a little bit smaller is just an only attribute to the fact that if she gets into deep waters with Amanda Nunes and I'm in Amanda's corner, if this fight goes in the 3rd round, I'm getting nervous.
Yeah, and you touched on it a second ago. I mean, the fact that this is now a 5-round fight. If there were concerns about your cardio management in a 3-round fight, then a 5-round fight is 2 rounds worse, I guess.
Yeah.
To do the simple
But I mean, that's
math.
what Amanda has to do. Is what she does is come out there and try to finish the fight in the first 2 rounds. Make it to where the fact that it'll never go 4 or 5 rounds. She needs to be strong, determined, and finish the fight early.
Of course, Amanda Nunes was the last person to defeat Ronda Rousey. And with Ronda gone now, Amanda Nunes has closed in on almost every record in the women's bantamweight division. I guess the one that Ronda's still probably going to have for a while is most submissions. But these numbers, Nunes has the most division victories with 7. She's tied for most stoppages with Ronda at 6. She has the second most first-round finishes with 6. That's 1 behind Ronda, who had 7. She's got the most KO victories. I mean, another win or 2 here, Frank, and it kind of amazingly, the history books are going to mention the name Amanda Nunes a lot more than they're going to mention Ronda Rousey.
Yeah, I think she's very quietly just amassed a very successful career, but really in the shadow of what was in the last several years is, Ronda Rousey. I mean, pretty much Ronda put the female division on the map. Women's fighting, was a large thanks to her, whether she ever decides to ever fight again, what she's done. So I think now Amanda Nunes has the opportunity to step out of that shadow and showcase that it isn't just the Ronda Rousey show, that there's a lot of great fighters out there. And I think, what better way to pass on that torch to Amanda Nunes than basically destroying her in less than a minute. I think she really has, it wasn't like she beat the girl that beat Ronda. She went out there and smashed Ronda Rousey.
Rounding out the main card, we've got a welterweight attraction between the always busy Neil Magny and the former light heavyweight champion Rafael Dos Anjos. Now, Dos Anjos, Frank, moved up to 170 pounds by defeating Tarek Safadine, won his debut up there. Now he's taken on Neil Magny, who fought 10 times between 2014 and 2015. There was a stretch there where it seemed like every other pay-per-view card had Neil Magny's name turning up somewhere on it. And he made a fan out of me with that Hector Lombard fight.
That's my favorite fight of his so far.
Oh, my God.
Nothing showcased more grit and determination and come back for skill. I mean, that fight was on the verge of being stopped one direction, and he turned it around and it came back so decisively. It was extremely impressive to watch.
Yeah, Magny's got a Cowboy Cerrone type work ethic to him. He's won 12 fights since 2013, and that's only 1 behind Cerrone. What do you think? With Dos Anjos moving up to welterweight, do you think 1 fight is always enough to really determine whether that's the right weight class for somebody, especially when they're competing at a maybe a higher level than most, or is that one of those incompletes until we really see a handful of outings?
I think we have to see a few times just because of the level of talent and ability of other guys out there competing, to see how he does. The weight cut was good. Obviously he's able to handle that. Feeling comfortable moving up, performing. Because sometimes the guys don't fight as well when they fight a weight class up because they're used to being a little bit smaller. So all of a sudden now they're carrying extra weight, and yes, they feel better because they didn't cut as much weight, but at the same time, they might not perform because there really is an optimal way that everybody fights it and performs that as an athlete.
Yeah, it's and then there's somebody who was in Dos Anjos's position of abandoning a weight class where you were pretty recently a champion until he ran into Eddie Alvarez. Of course, there was the almost but not quite fight that never took place between Dos Anjos and Conor McGregor. Do you think there's anything mentally to something like that where a fighter decides to leave a weight class, and by leaving it, they do kind of leave a lot on the table? They were a champion. They at one time had a big money fight in front of them with McGregor, and you're watching what all he's doing and all that. You think sometimes it's tough for a fighter to leave a weight division when sometimes there might be some unfinished business for him back at the old weight?
Yeah, it can be. But, there's so many factors for why guys want to go to a different weight class. Especially in this situation, usually you see guys cut down a weight class, if they get an advantage. When a guy has a certain amount of success at a lower weight class and moves up, especially isn't like, Desan, a young guy where it's like, oh, you're filling out. He's still in his late 20s, 30 years old. It's like, well, what factors as far as, moving up? But, now I think you're seeing that because there's things like, for example, no ID badge. There's a lot of guys, I think, now that have to change weight classes because USADA not allowing them to rehydrate with an ID badge. So they, I think guys tried to do it that way, but found out that they weren't able to be as successful. So they've had to make some readjustments in what weight they fight at.
Couple other fights on the main card here to round it out. In the 205 division, Ilir Latifi is taking on the undefeated Tyson Pedro. And, Frank, this light heavyweight division is a division that is kind of in need of some fighters amassing some momentum in terms of interest, especially now with what's happened with John Jones. Rumble Johnson is now retired, and speaking of Rumble, he and Latifi are the only two fighters in light heavyweight history that have ended two fights in less than a minute. So Latifi has some knockout power. Pedro, who's 6-0, all of his wins have come by stoppage. So here's a couple of guys that know how to finish fights, and seems like the light heavyweight division could do with a few more names being on the tips of everybody's tongues.
Yeah, I think right now, you've had it to basically between Cormier and John. Two guys have dominated the division. Gustafsson is in there, and I think that he's making a name for himself. And another cry for hopefully the shot at the title, but. Right now, with the way everything's mixed up right now with the situation going on with John, hopefully the middle of the division can start really, orchestrating, and we can see some guys really start to come through that become, names that are recognizable, that, to garner more interest in the weight class. It's not just the John Jones and Cormier show.
Kicking off the main card, and this is kind of an odd situation because you've got Gilbert Melendez returning to action. Seems like forever since we've seen him fight. He's going to be taking on Jeremy Stephens, but both of these guys are in pretty serious need of a jump start. Melendez is on a 3-fight skid. He's only fought twice since 2014. And Stephens, who has fought the last couple of years at featherweight, coming down from lightweight, is 5-5. So seems like this is one of those fights that we see ever so often in the UFC where it's like the winner is hopefully going to get a little bit of a boost for his career, and the loser may have some pretty serious soul searching to do.
Yeah, I think that Gilbert's more in trouble with that scenario than Stevenson is. I think Stevenson is just, he's a super exciting fighter. He hits hard, creates knockouts. The guy's a highlight reel in a moment. On both sides of it. He usually, wins a highlight reel fashion, or he loses that way. So the guy is somebody I don't really see ever being cut unless it becomes a health issue. Mm-hmm. He goes back and forth. He's always in wars. He's super fun to watch. Melendez, on the other end, I think sometimes, he's had more speed bumps. His fighting style is not quite as exciting to watch. So I think really he's the one who's going to really need to have a win come Saturday to keep the conversation going, or he might be looking for a new place to fight.
Yeah. It's, I think, kind of tells you a lot about the sport of MMA and the UFC's approach to prioritizing exciting fights. You talk about how Little Heathen is one of the most exciting fighters, fight in and fight out. He also, Frank, holds the UFC record for most losses in promotion history with 13. And that kind of drives the point home, doesn't it? That a fighter who, has more losses than anybody else is also most commonly associated as being one of their more exciting fighters. I mean, I think that kind of explains what the winning formula of that promotion has been about all these years.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, going out there and just, you could be a John Fitch. Look what happened to his career. People get rid of him. The minute they had an opportunity to cut him, they did. Because, if people don't want to watch you fight, who cares how many fights you win? If they're boring, people want to watch exciting fights. They want to watch guys go out there and dominate. And then on the flip side, if you're a guy that lives by the sword, by the sword type, who either wins in highlight fashion or loses, you're probably going to have a job that's entertaining. People want to watch that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I always enjoy watching. I'll tell you one thought that's always in the back of my mind, though, when it comes to Jeremy Stephens, Frank. I'm always afraid that Jeremy Stephens is going to randomly be in the audience at one of my stand-up shows, and I'm going to tell that only God can judge me tattoo joke I have. I mean, he made a whole back piece out of that thing. So, I don't know. I'll try to make sure you're around for that show, so maybe you can help moderate the discussion in the immediate aftermath.
I'll make sure I explain it very well.
All right, man. Well, that's kind of our it's an abbreviated show, but Frank's got to get on a plane. We wanted to break down the UFC pay-per-view card this Saturday, and then what we're going to do while Frank's on the road, we'll be hooking up via phone like this. Sometimes we're going to be on Skype. It's really going to depend on what country you're in, because you've done enough traveling now, Frank, that you can actually sort of predetermine which countries are going to have the strongest internet signals.
I'm starting to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
So Kazakhstan's probably not going to be a good one, buddy.
Yep. Well, that's okay. That's okay. We'll come up with a workaround, and I'm sure, as always, we'll get a little help from our friends, as Ringo Starr and Joe Cocker would say, from the MMA community, helping to fill us out a little bit.
Yeah.
Thanks to everybody who came out to the Frank and I did a private screening of American Assassin, the new Michael Keaton film. We went to see that last night. And that was pretty cool to see everybody that turned out for that. So thanks to everybody who did that here in Las Vegas with us. We appreciate that. Awesome. Yep. And Frank, how about a quick word for all of our listeners? I know I mentioned it at the top of the show, but you articulate it so well. Explain to everybody how they can help the show by doing their shopping on Amazon just by clicking through that banner that's at phoneboothfighting.com.
Yeah, one of the easiest ways to help us out is every time you do your shopping for your needs and accessories, click through the Amazon banner on our website, so that way that Amazon kicks us back a small percentage back towards our show. No extra cost to you, but of a great benefit to us. That's it.
And you can do that. You can obviously support our fine sponsors like Ursa Brew, like Low T Nation, Real Water, Robert Drysdale, BJJ, that you hear about on the show. And visit phoneboothfighting.com early and often. T-shirts, multiple colors, multiple styles, shipping now and available for you. All right, for Frank Mir, who's on his way overseas, and for me, who's got to go back in and sort out things with the hookers. I'm Richard Hunter. He's Frank Mir, and we'll see you next time right back here on Phone Booth Fighting.